You are with the big story with us. I'm Seher Zama. The top focus in a decision that has been taken by the Supreme Court in ordering the cancellation of registration of all Amrapali Group of companies and directed the ED as well to conduct a probe against the group for diverting home buyers' money. The NBCC, which is the National Buildings Construction Corporation, has now been asked to complete all the pending projects. ED is to register money laundering cases against Amrapali, its CMD and its directors.
NBCC कंस्ट्रक्शन करेगी और NBCC के लिए जो पैसों की ज़रूरत है वो जितनी आम्रपाली की प्रॉपर्टीज़ हैं, उनके डायरेक्टर्स हैं, उनके रिश्तेदार हैं, उन सब की प्रॉपर्टी जब्त करने के बाद उनको बेचकर जितने हजार करोड़ मिले वो हजारों करोड़ से NBCC जो इनकम्प्लीट प्रोजेक्ट हैं उनको कंप्लीट करेगी.
Right, let's get in those inputs, further details on how this is going to work out on ground in absolute relief. Can home buyers now expect to get their homes in a deadline that could be put across here by the NBC? We have with us our Deputy News Editor Meenakshi Bhanja getting us all of those details here. Meenakshi, while this is being seen as relief for home buyers because there is some clarity on the road ahead, to what extent can NBCC fulfill those demands as put across by the Supreme Court to complete these projects?
Well, Seher, the biggest takeaway from today's developments has been as to how the Amrapali Group, number one, ceases to exist as a corporate real estate entity. That's the biggest takeaway. The second biggest takeaway is how the Supreme Court has cracked down on a real estate firm in this manner for the first time, perhaps, And the third, obviously, has been as to how the Supreme Court has also sought to accommodate the interests of the home buyers by asking the NBCC to take over the pending outstanding projects which were thus far the responsibility of the Amrapali Group. The fourth biggest takeaway has been as to how the Supreme Court has asked for the ED to get involved and register cases of money laundering against the Amrapali CMD and others who have been in charge. The fifth biggest takeaway has been as to how the Supreme Court has made some glaring observations pertaining to gross negligence in supervision of projects. It has also gone on to say as to how Greater Noida authorities will have absolutely zero rights on staking any claims because the Supreme Court has said that these are the bodies, the banks, lending banks, Noida and Greater Noida authorities, whose officials have been in connivance with the Amrapali Group to have allowed the group to carry on with their nefarious activities for thus far. So these are the main operative takeaways from today's verdict. And of course, the other nuances about NBC completion of outstanding projects and other aspects will be other aspects which can be discussed in the foreseeable future if and when NBCC has any doubts and it knocks on the Supreme Court for further modifications or clarifications.
Okay, Meenakshi, appreciate you listing out all of what has been instructed by the Supreme Court and what this means for home buyers. We're going to be getting our panelists on this as well. Let's, in fact, first get in the word here from Mr. Amit Gupta, who's a consultant in real estate. Appreciate you being with us, Mr. Amit Gupta. We'll be looking at this as relief with respect to clarity on the issue. There is going to be forward movement, but how far do you think that the NBCC can do this in a duration of a few months or a year or so? Because this is anyway multiple delayed projects that we're looking at, which were under the Amrapali Group.
Absolutely. I think first off, this is absolutely a first-time judgment in the history of the various impending matters before the Honorable Supreme Court. That includes not only Amrapali but several other large groups, operating out of Noida, Greater Noida, which have been stuck in a limbo. And I think this is the first attempt really where we've seen some outcome of the way forward, where a government body or a PSU has been directed to go ahead and start completion of the project. Last year, NBCC had submitted a feasibility report wherein they had pegged the actual cost of completing these 45,000 apartments at about 8,500 crore rupees, and had sought a commission of about 8% or 650 crore rupees to actually do these projects on its own and see completion of these projects, and had sought financial assistance for the same. So this question really begs now, I think, two further answers. First, clearly, I think this is a positive step, a step forward in terms of seeing an end game or an outcome to seeing the delivery and the light of the day for these 40,000 odd home buyers. But really, where is the money? First. Second, does NBCC have the requisite experience, the resources, and the track record to do development at such a massive scale? While NBCC has claimed that it can start delivering grade A, it has divided these apartments into 3 different categories depending on the completion of these projects. And it has said that it can start delivering the first set of apartments in about 6 months and can effectively finish the entire development in about 3 years. But does it have the resources? We don't know, because the history of NBCC is not that deep that it has actually gone ahead and developed, so many millions of square feet of development in such a short period of time. I think that's the first. Second, I would also not be entirely sure into what is the quality of construction and the materials that have been utilized for the existing developments, given that there must be at least a 20-year guarantee for the developments that happen. Is NBCC also going to be liable for these guarantees and for the completion thereof? Or would the liability lie elsewhere?
Are you saying that while the Supreme Court in its wisdom could offer the best possible solution in the current given circumstances, it is still not a question of value of money returned to what the home buyers paid for and what they had in mind and what was promised by the Amrapali Group, whether or not the NBCC will be able to match up to that? Or is it now just a question of handing over the homes under whatever circumstances, as you're questioning material, you're questioning structural stability, all of that the NBCC could be taken to task to?
Well, that is absolutely not clear, and I'm assuming that NBCC had in its feasibility study taken into account the various parameters as per the National Building Code, which is the minimum standard to be followed to be able to construct and deliver these buildings, which may not necessarily be in line with the promises which has been made by the developer in terms of amenities, in terms of the interior fit-outs, etc. We don't still know that, but I think if you have to start first dealing with the actual cost involved to deliver this, they have estimated at 8,500 crore rupees. Now we know that the receivables from the buyers from these existing 15 odd projects is roughly about 3,853 crore rupees. That leaves a gap of about 4,650 crore rupees to feasibly finish these projects without any margin to anybody, without paying the land dues to Noida, Greater Noida, which the Supreme Court has effectively taken away their right to actually collect any further land dues. Also doesn't cover any of the dues to the banks, which again the Supreme Court has isolated those claims from these developments. So even if you have to take all those other claims and charges and other sort of dues out, just the actual cost of delivery of these projects at 8,500 crores needs a gap of about 4,500 crores of financing, which clearly nobody is willing to provide because there is no feasibility to provide this capital. However, NBCC has also claimed that there are about 4,885 flats which will get developed as part of these schemes, which are still unsold, which could potentially bring in about 2,600 crore rupees of cash. If that was to happen, that would still leave a gap of about 2,000 crore rupees to finish these buildings. And remember, without full financial closure, it is a dangerous business where you start taking the entire capital of the buyers, but you still don't have the entire money to finish these buildings. So there is still a viability gap of 2,000 crore rupees.
So how do we expect this clarity? Mr. Goenka, these are very interesting points in already having studied part of the Supreme Court order on what all can the NBCC deliver on. Can they really deliver in all aspects of meeting with deadlines, meeting with timelines, being up to the mark in construction quality? So how do we ensure that this clarity is brought about? What would be the next step in bringing about this clarity? It shouldn't be a case of home buyers going to court yet again in lapses by the NBCC.
Well, I think, the only way is then now to have some sort of a government intervention, and the Supreme Court has certainly stated in its wisdom, and the Honorable Court has mentioned that it is time that the central and state governments also step in and start assuming responsibility towards their constituents, towards the home buyers. And if that be the case, then I think it is upon the state and central bodies to provide that viability gap financing of about 2,500 crore rupees, so that the project is financially closed. You don't want a situation where the home buyers end up paying whatever balance monies they need to provide, and there not being enough money still to finish these buildings. So I think it is imperative at this
And there's
point in
still
time.
not enough money, because that's right. Yes,
Yeah,
please
so
stay with us, Mr. Goenka. It's going to be important here to hear a fresh reaction, a first reaction coming in from a home buyer who is invested in a house in the Amrapali Group. Mr. Amit Gupta, thank you for being with us, Mr. Amit Gupta. Your first reaction, do you look at this as absolute relief, or do you think this is just the first step of clarity, and there's perhaps still a few more battles to fight just to get your home?
I would say this is absolute clarity in a way that what is going to be the fate of builder as well as the home buyers is absolutely clear cut in terms of today's judgment of Supreme Court. But to talk about the financing which Mr. Goenka was talking about, I don't know if he has not done his homework correctly, but the economics which he has talked about of a deficit of 2,000 odd crores, it really does not exist. I mean, if you want me to talk about that economics, I can explain you. But as far as reaction is concerned, we are absolutely sure that the nexus which we were trying to highlight in Supreme Court, saying that the builders, the banks, as well as the authorities are hand in glove, and they have been, using our money for their own luxury. So today's order has given a clear-cut message to all builders, just
No,
not
so if
Amrapali.
there is a
Amrapali may
deficit, if
just
the
be a
money
face
has already
of,
been used for their own luxury and not for constructing your homes, so there will be a deficit in all the money that has already been paid by the home buyers if it's not been used for the construction. So there is a deficit, and the NBCC will need to look into it, or perhaps another Supreme Court order will need to look into it, how one deals with that deficit then.
No, I don't think it's actually required. I mean, if you go with the finances, I have been struggling. I have been fighting the case since the day one I filed the case. I mean, economics is pretty simple. The moment we asked Supreme Court to terminate the lease was on the basis of the factual figure, which is 512 odd crores of Amrapali, which they have paid 10%. I mean, everybody knows that they have paid 10% and they have defaulted on 90%. So you have 500 odd crores which can be used as a seed capital if that amount can be forfeited. Now to talk about, NBCC stated 8,500 odd crores. They wanted 1,000 odd crore to start the machine. Now for 1,000, if you see 512 crores, I'll take broadly as 500 odd crores as a seed capital forfeited amount. It can be immediately pumped up. It can be given to NBCC. Now the figures of sold and unsold inventory as well as the buyer's receivable amounts to approximately around 3,500 odd crores. So 3,500 crores, if you will take that amount plus 500, you come close to 4,000 odd crores. Now they have also stated that the money which is going to come up into this economics is going to be in another two ways. For an example, if you see DART values, the auction, they have made it very amply clear that Amrapali Group's asset as well as their directors' personal assets needs to be sold to be able to bring back that money. Obviously, 3,500 crores which they have siphoned off is not going to come up at the same value. It would be slightly less. It can be 20%, 30% less. Now, the deficit of 400 or 4,000 odd crore is going to be the additional FSI of the project, unused land of the project, as well as the project FAR. If you talk about Amrapali Group project, they still have multiple FARs left with them.
That's
so
right.
the moment you increase the
Mr.
FAR,
Amit
you are
Gupta,
going
we
to
understand
get more
you've made those calculations here, and you maintain that this is an absolute relief. But let's get in a voice here from the Supreme Court. We have Mr. Uday Vavikar, advocate with the Supreme Court, with us over the phone line. Mr. Vavikar, thank you for being with us. Can you explain in what the Supreme Court has stated today on exactly how the NBCC can go about completing this project and even dealing with, if there would be in the process, a deficit in funds required to complete these projects?
The first is this is a good order and it is going to be an exemplary order, but at the same time,
Yes.
what the consumers are going to get and when they are going to get is the issue. Because my learned friend has just given the statistics, but it's good on papers. But for realizing the individual assets of the directors of the company of the Amrapali, is it going to be easy? And what will be the way to recover this? Even enforcement, it will take a lot of time to recover. What is the period that is going to be there? How the construction phase-wise is going to become? Nothing is clear. And when the actual consumers will get the flat, is it that the consumer will have to again contribute to bring this deficit of 4 crores, which my learned friend is telling? And from where this deficit is going to come?
Right. So,
That is
Mr.
one big
Vavekar,
question mark.
in your understanding, would there be a deficit? Because we have Mr. Amit Gupta, who's a home buyer with us. He seems to have done
Yes.
all the calculation, saying that even if personal wealth of those who've had positions in the Amrapali Group, including the MB and the owner, even if all of that is taken into account, it would perhaps not create a deficit.
See, the steps will be very slow. The question is how much time and how much time it will be recovered, and whether a distressed sales of the personal properties would fetch you that kind of amount. What would be the deficit? I am not a finance student, so I am a company secretary, but I can work out, and I have an MBA also simultaneously
Yeah.
as a lawyer. It looks, because the judicial process is slow, the recovery process is also going to be slow. We understand after the receivers are appointment in how much time the properties are liquidated. What happens to their various other liquidated liabilities of the builder, including the bank? How much is the hypothecated there? Maybe Amit ji can throw a light, but I'm not that issue. I'm on a legal issue. My question is, what actually
Yes.
a consumer will get and when he will get? Because these papers,
Okay.
paperwork
And you
sounds
think,
good.
but what do you think is the next step to get clarity on that? On
Yes.
when and how? How does one get
How?
clarity on that? Is it now for the
Clarity, because
NBCC to
again,
be issuing
there's
out a statement on
another question.
the
There's another question coming up legally.
yes.
That is, if the consumer wants the refund and he doesn't want the flat, is there any option for him? And who will pay that? Because today, at least he has to receive the market value or the representative value to the extent of the ready reckoner value. If he has to buy a flat, he will not get a flat at that value. That's the question.
All right.
And-
So,
and
Mr. Amit Gupta, if from your understanding, because of course you're an affected party, you've tracked very minute details here of this case. It was literally a battle that home buyers were fighting. Mr. Gupta, do you feel that the NBCC now, after scrutinizing the Supreme Court order, will need to issue a statement, be in touch with home buyers soon enough now to at least help each of us understand the workflow on how the NBCC is going to work towards delivering this?
See, the order, I was in the court, the order specifically says what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how to get it done. The question which the learned friend is talking about is more on the execution part. Now, the question of execution itself is mentioned in the order. NBCC has given a detailed project report which says that the first house, which starts from the 12 months duration, and the last house which is going to be delivered, it needs to be delivered in 36 plus 4, that is 40 months. This is what their DPR says. Now, the question is when NBCC is going to execute it. Now, it is very clear in the first instant when they filed this DPR in January, they have said that the moment Supreme Court orders, they should be in a position to mobilize the workforce in 30 to 45 days. This is on record, on proposal, they have clearly mentioned it. So I don't think there is a question of when they should do it and who, and there is a committee. I mean, obviously on the 9th of August, there would be a hearing pending. In that, we have not read the order, we have just heard what the honorable judges have said that. So there should be, our kind of proposal was that there should be a monitoring committee. which we will propose it if there is not in the order. So we will we'll do a review of it. But as far as the execution part is concerned, yes, it will take time to kick off. But once it is kicked off, I don't think economics of financing is going to be an issue with it at all.
All right. That is undoubtedly being extremely positive and welcoming this step without doubt by the Supreme Court, because it is the first step in clearing up the clutter, in taking the next step, which would be a workable solution. Let's get in one of our viewers calling in. We have Mr. Rajpal from Mumbai. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, madam, of course the registration has been cancelled and this is a probe by the ED, but they have committed the criminal offence also. They have committed the criminal offence of cheating, fraud and misappropriation. That cases should also be registered. I don't know why the cases have not been registered. And whatever property, their property, that should also be seized and auctioned, so that the money which poor people have invested, hard-earned money, should be recovered from these people.
Right.
Hello?
Yes, an aspect of that would be taken into account here. Many thanks for calling us in here. In fact, let me put this forth here directly to the home buyer, Mr. Amit Gupta here with us. Mr. Gupta, this is of course a case under the ED as far as financial fraud here is concerned. Do you think there should be criminal prosecution as well?
No, I think Mr. Rajpal is not updated about the orders of today. The Honorable Court has very clearly stated in the order that ED is going to do the scrutiny of money laundering, because the banks like JP Morgan have been violated the FEMA regulations. They have very clearly and categorically mentioned that the money has been laundered from India to in other countries. So ED is going to monitor it, as well as in parallelly they have empowered all the criminal agencies like EOWs and the respective thanas or to look over the FIRs, and they have been instructed to file the report in every 3 months. The Supreme Court is going to take up a kind of a review in every 3 months on how their police is completing the investigation on criminality of it, and ED is going to take care of the financial irregularities of it. Apart from this, they have also instructed the institution of Federation of Chartered Accountants, wherein they have specifically asked those institutions to look over the conduct of the forensic auditors and to take appropriate action as per the rule book of it. And this has also been a time bound. They have to file this reply of what action they have taken, what initiation they have done in terms of the scrutiny of CFO of Amrapali Wadhwa, as well as the statutory auditors of the group. So everybody is time bound. I am sure if anybody would read that order at length, every time bound monitoring of every process has been clearly defined there. So it would be jumping the guns if we will not read the order now. It's better we read the order. Everything has been clearly outlined. The 8 points which Honorable bench has set, they have very clearly
and this is time bound on paper. In reality, it could be very different here. Mr. Amit Goenka, as a consultant in the real estate sector here, what is that one precautionary measure you think that Amrapali home buyers should be taking right now?
So I have a few suggestions. I think first let me start by complimenting Mr. Amit Gupta on the landmark judgment. I think it paves the way for an extraordinary resolution in the few months, years to come as far as other several thousand home buyers are concerned. I think what he stated is fairly correct. Having said that, I must also remind him that we're a very active investor in the space. I have several investments in Noida. We have several investments in other parts of the country. And as understanding financial closure means having money in the bank. It's not about just having assets. I think Uday Vavikar has already pointed that out. I think he's right in mentioning, and I didn't cover that, I'm aware of it entirely, that there is about 144 lakh square feet of FSI unutilized available, which may be worth about 2,000 crores. Please understand that the assets of the promoters, the unutilized land, FSI, buildable area, etc. has value, but monetizing it is a completely separate ballgame, which Uday Vavikar has already pointed out. I would recommend first that all these assets, whether they are unutilized land banks, FSI, assets of the promoters, company, whatever, is now sub judice, which is under liquidation, which is under sale over a period of time, be created into some sort of a trust. There must be financing against those assets upfront. It could be a state body, it could be a government-led body,
Right.
it could be one of the public sector institutions which takes up
Absolutely.
that
So,
mantle of
undoubtedly,
securitizing those
this is
assets.
just the start of a long, drawn-out process on the road to justice here for home buyers. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. But nevertheless, this is coming as huge relief this afternoon to the home buyers of Amrapali Group here. They've been waiting for almost a decade, waiting for justice here. This is a final decision having been taken by the Supreme Court, but the workability of this on ground. When will I finally get my home? Is that real concern of the home buyer who's invested in the Amrapali Group, and that perhaps could still, unfortunately, still be a long journey. Thank you for being here.